Well, hi folks, and welcome along to the Old Classic Car channel. Now, a commenter on a recent video said, how about another video or two about some of the things here in the garage? Not the cars themselves, but just the items of clutter that are dotted around and have sort of been accumulated over the last 40 or so years of being interested in the old car thing. And I thought, yeah, that's probably quite a good idea, because there are different things hanging up in there which, I mean, they don't have any financial value as such, but a lot of them have a story associated with them. And I thought, yeah, it'd be quite good fun just to pick out a few bits and bobs that are either hanging up in the garage or tucked away around the sides, getting in the way, and just talk a little bit about them, where they came from, and why it is that despite them being pretty much worthless, I've hung on to them for all this time, and in many cases I've hung on to these things for 30 odd years, 40 years even, and I can't see that changing anytime soon. So yeah, it's a lovely day, the sun is out, the birds are twittering away in the tree behind me, and the field is being ploughed over there, but I'll try and record these clips while it is at the far end as opposed to this end, and hopefully by the end of this we'll get a video together just looking at some of the bits and bobs around here and the backstories behind them, because hopefully it's an interesting little story to tell. And let me know in the comments if you, like me, tend to hang on to these old bits and bobs when on paper it makes no sense at all. Okay, now I'm going to begin this video, and indeed round it off, by looking at a couple of the number plates which are adorning the garage behind me. You may have seen there are a few old number plates on here. These mainly are just old random number plates that I've accumulated over the years. The only one that's got any real significance is this one, 280 YBH. That's off the old bull-nosed two-stroke Saab van that I rescued in about 1990 or 1991, but that is not going to feature in this particular video. No, the most important, probably the most important number plate of all here at OCC Towers is in fact this one here, this KED 453F, and that is the original front registration plate from what was the very first car, I think, that technically was mine. The A40 over here is the very first car that I ran on the road and I took my test in, but I think KED 453F probably just predates it in terms of coming into my ownership. This was the Mark III Triumph Spitfire that Dad acquired in March of 1985 for the princely sum of £25, and a £25 purchase price might give you some clue as to what kind of condition it was in. It was far from pretty. The floors, the sills, boot floor, hardtop bonnet, rear wings, rear panel, I think that was it, were all pretty much rotted out. It was a wreck. It had been taken to pieces and there were just boxes and boxes of parts. The engine had been filled with engine oil to the brim, in theory to keep it in good condition, which it didn't do. So yeah, this is the original front plate off that car. Now Dad acquired this, like I say, early in 1985. He chopped out the floors, chopped out the sills, didn't brace anything, which if you've ever restored a Herald or a Spitfire GT6, you know that bracing across the doors is a good idea before you chop the sills out, but there you go. And it was sometime between, yeah, about 1987, about the time I did my O-levels, I think, school exams, that I think he passed it on to me and basically said, yeah, go, get on with it. And that I did. And I eventually, over the next couple of years or so, did piece it together. A friend of a friend welded the floors up, the sills, all that kind of thing. And one birthday or Christmas I was given a whole box of Rattle Can Red, and I gave it a lick of paint, and eventually this car was put back on the road and I ran it for 2 or 3 years, I think, something like that. I think there was a couple of periods, and I also had the A40 on the road at the same time, and I sort of alternated between the two depending on which one was actually running at the time. And I kept that car until about 1993, I think it was, and then I ended up selling it on. I think I'd got one of the Volvo Amazons on the road by then as well, and it was just the time to let it go. And I lost touch with it for a little while. I believe it got parked up somewhere, not perhaps in the most salubrious of areas, and it sort of fell into disrepair again. The bonnet was stolen off it, and yeah, I think it basically fell on hard times again until someone else actually took it on and restored it back to really, really nice condition. To be honest, much better condition than I ever had it in, because I was on a very, very tight budget. As I explained in the About Me video that I did, well, probably a couple of years ago now, something like that, I actually sold my O-level computing project to a business computer magazine, a PC magazine, one of the very early PC magazines, and Dad had a clone of an IBM PC built by Ferranti where he worked, and I did my O-level project on that, and I actually sold that project to this business magazine, and they featured it as Programme of the Month, I think in about September of 1987, and that raised about 500 quid, which was not to be sniffed at, and that money got ploughed into resurrecting KED 453F. And yeah, so it changed hands a couple of times after I had it, and it's actually still around. I have been in touch with a gentleman who lives down Coventry way, I think, which is kind of appropriate, given that so many car makers were based down in that neck of the woods, including Triumph. So yeah, so happily KED 453F is still around, and this is one of the items that reminds me of that particular car. Well, definitely the first car I pieced back together, one of the very first cars I ran on the road. So this is going nowhere other than back up, hanging up in the garage behind me. Right, let's go and have a look at something else. Well, okay, well, item number 2 in this gallery of horrors is the battered remains of this, a Cooper Stewart speedometer from the 1930s, and as you can see, it is in less than pristine condition. There is no rational, sensible reason for keeping this particular speedo. There are no usable parts on it, nothing is any good, but there is a little story associated with this one as well. Now, many is the time I have gone out, ever since passing my test in 1987, just for a drive, just to have a look around and just see what interesting cars can be spotted, especially if you go off the beaten track a little bit, just go driving around. And certainly in sort of the days before we bought our first house and the weekends were clear, there was very little to do, we used to just go driving off around anywhere and just see what we could see. And there was a particular route that we often used to take in the vicinity of Jodrell Bank, or the Lovell Telescope. Jodrell Bank is actually the area that the Lovell Telescope is actually situated in, not far from Chelford in Cheshire. And we used to often go driving around there, and there used to be one of those nice little curvy corrugated metal garages, a little building, could even be like possibly a building taken from an old World War II camp somewhere, who knows. Here comes the tractor, great news. So anyway, and sticking out of the back of one of these little curvy corrugated buildings was the remains of a Ford Model Y. Now, I did mention this once on the website many years ago, and someone actually got in touch and said, oh, I remember that car, I remember seeing that car. And it had been sat there for a very long time in this open fronted little building, and you could see it from the road, and I'm sure many people did indeed spot it. One day I decided I've got to go and ask the question, find out what the story is with that little car. And the owner, I think he bought the property and the car was just there when he moved in, and I think it had been outside for a long time, because it was probably the world's rustiest Ford Model Y. And I've had a number of Model Ys over the years, but this was by far and away the worst. It was absolutely rotten to pieces. It was in terrible condition, way beyond any restoration. The only thing joining the front to the back was the torque tube. Those Fords, the side valve Fords, have what they call a torque tube arrangement. They don't have a conventional prop shaft between the back of the gearbox and the back axle. But if you can imagine where the prop shaft will be, that was the only thing that was holding the back to the front, and the body had collapsed on it. It was down over the back wheels. It was just a wreck. And at the time I did have a couple of side valve Fords, so I got chatting to the owner of this place, and we basically agreed that for £20 I could have effectively the salvage rights to whatever was of any use on this particular little Ford. And when I actually went to have a proper look at it, there was very, very little of use. I think some of the original glass is actually still here. It was a two-door saloon Ford Model Y of about 1934, 1935, something like that. But I've always been a bit of a sucker for pre-war cars and barn finds, garage, all that kind of thing. It's just really, really up my street. There wasn't a huge amount that I ended up rescuing off that particular car. I think there may have been a couple of wheels and a few mechanical parts, that kind of thing. And he said, well, just leave the rest here. And in fact, it stayed there actually for a few years afterwards. I think it had designs on putting up a new garage in the same location as where this little curvy building had been. And he thought, well, when he actually applies for planning permission, the fact that there is an old tin shed there with a car in it shows that there has been a garage there before. So I think that was probably his thinking about that by leaving it all there. But I did manage to claim a few interesting bits and bobs back for it, save a few things, like I say, wheels, odds and ends, switches, that kind of thing. And amongst them was this old Cooper Stewart gauge. And this, apart from the bits of glass that I mentioned, this is the only real surviving part, probably, of that car, certainly here at OCC HQ. So even though it's pretty ropey condition, that is why this is hanging up over the workbench at the back there. So if you see this in the background in any of the videos, you think, why on earth has he got that old scrap speedometer there? Well, that is why. Like I said, none of this is rational, none of it makes any sense at all. But there's a bit of garage decoration. I think that is just perfect, and it fits in. It fits in with the overall ethos and the theme of the garage here, just perfectly, I think. Okie dokie, next up in this gallery of horrors are, well, in fact, two items which relate to the same car. So I'll present Exhibit 1, and here we have a car radiator grille, as you can see. And this was originally fitted to a Jaguar XJ6, one of the Series 1 cars. These were introduced in 1968 and made until about 73. Now, this was actually fitted to an XJ12L, which, if you know your old Jaguar XJs, you'll know that they actually had a different grille on them. But this is the grille that was originally fitted to a long wheelbase XJ12 from 1972 or 3 that I bought way back in the mid 1990s. Now that was a really, really interesting car. It's a car that I spotted on a driveway, and that was in Gatley, which is in Cheshire, sort of North Cheshire, that kind of way, a few miles south of Manchester. And over time I'd noticed that this car appeared to have taken root on someone's driveway, so I knocked on the door and found out that it actually belonged to the gentleman who lived across the road, and he was just using this lady's driveway as a bit of extra storage. And the guy who lived over the road from her, he was the local council, one of the local councillors for Stockport Council. His name was Eric Livesey, and he was quite an interesting fellow. I think he'd bought this XJ Series 1 quite a long time before, and in fact he had an XJ12 Series 2 on his own driveway, and also a vintage Bentley, a 3-litre Bentley from the 1920s, and he'd regularly be seen commuting in that 3-litre Bentley Tourer through Cheadle High Street, which is where I grew up. Well, not in the High Street, but in Cheadle. He'd regularly be seen commuting to and from the offices at Stockport Town Hall in this incredible Bentley. But the Jaguar, well, that really caught my eye. It was a very dark blue, midnight blue, and it was just an incredible looking car. And I just thought, what a phenomenal looking thing that is. At the time I had no money at all, and I did make a few inquiries, and he did say yes, I would sell it. It hadn't been on the road for a little while, but it wasn't in too bad a condition at all. A couple of bubbles here and there on the bottom of the doors, but nothing that you'd really lose any sleep over. And I thought, I've got to try and get the money together somehow. And I can't remember what I did. I probably started selling off some old workshop manuals and bits and bobs that I'd acquired. Like I say, this was about 1995, so I was a few years in to my motoring journey by that point in time. And the idea, I think I was out of work at the time, and the idea of buying a V12 Series 1 Jaguar, which did about 10 to the gallon on a good day, wasn't perhaps the most sensible, but I never try and let too much sensibleness cloud my decision making when it comes to old cars. So I was scrabbling around trying to get the money. Then one day I noticed that the Jaguar had disappeared from this driveway, and I thought, oh no, what's happened? And there's the tractor. And it turns out he'd actually sold it to somebody else in Cheadle, just a couple of miles down the road, and I thought, oh no. So anyway, I tracked down where the car was, sporting this grille, and I got talking to the owner, and I think he liked it, but whether he bought it just to flip it on or something, I'm not quite sure. And he says, yeah, I'll sell it to you. I think the asking price was about £1,000. I'm not sure what the previous owner asked for it. I'm not sure if we ever got quite that far into the sort of discussions, but the new owner, I think he was going to take £1,000 for it, and I said, listen, I'm going to try and get the money together, and eventually somehow I did. So this was like 94, 95, somewhere around that kind of time period. But what an incredible car that was. I mean, I used to go and sign on in this car. I used to put like a gallon of fuel in it, which, like I say, would only get you about 10 or 11 miles down the road, and that was with a light foot. Those early V12 Jags with the 4 carburettors were not frugal by any stretch of the imagination. So any dolman in that I received at the time went straight into the fuel tank of the XJ12. I kept it in a lockup. I didn't run it all the time, but just sort of high days and holidays. You'd chuck a gallon of fuel in it, stagger off down the road, and then come back on fumes, push it back into the lockup, and then it'd come out again a week or so later for another little trip out. So I think I was probably running the A40 at the same time, so at least this one was nice and cheap to run, even if that XJ12 was not. But back to this grille, this was fitted to it. At some point in its life it had a bit of a ding on the front. The bonnet had been replaced, and the grills rather, for the XJ12 Series 1 were not everywhere. They only made a few hundred of those cars before the Series 2 came along. So clearly someone thought, well, we'll just chuck an XJ6 grille on instead, and this is the grille that was fitted to that car when I bought it. Eventually I did actually spot the correct grille for it in the Tatton Park Auto Jumble. I bought that, and I attended Tatton Park on day 2, Sunday, with the correct grille in place. So that was a bit of a good result. So that is why this is hanging up in the garage as a reminder of the very first Jaguar that I ever bought. I've had a few XJ saloons over the years, and including the V8 that we've got now, but this is the original grille fitted to the XJ12L Series 1 that I bought way back in the mid-1990s. And just to add, there is also a second item down here, like I say, relating to this car. If I can just step over here. This is one of the original hubcaps off that XJ12L, and I'm going to talk about that next. Okay, so the XJ12 hubcap, how did this end up staying here when the rest of the car was sold back in the 1990s? Well, as I touched upon on a video a little while ago, when I was talking about discovering this old church silver in a river in Cheadle, thinking they were hubcaps that had been lobbed in the river, I used to collect old car hubcaps, and these sort of things used to ping off quite regularly. If someone brushed a curb or something like that when they were parking, the hubcaps were quite prone just to pinging off and disappearing, and they'd just be left on the side of the road. And I accumulated quite a collection of old car hubcaps, or fairly modern car hubcaps, back in the 1970s. And one of them was a really, really nice hubcap from a Series 1 or a Series 2 XJ saloon, and I hung on to it and kept it for all those years, and it was in immaculate condition, no rust, no pickling or anything like that on it at all. Apologies if the tractor is drowning me out a little bit, but yeah, I had this immaculate XJ hubcap hanging up on the wall at home, on my bedroom wall back at home at the time. And when I got hold of this XJ12, I thought it'd be nice to spruce it up with some better hubcaps, and I had this immaculate one hanging up on the wall at home. So I took off the worst of the hubcaps on the car itself, this one, and fitted the one off my bedroom wall that I'd picked up many years before. I put that on the car, and that stayed on the car when it went. But I hung on to this because this again is another link back to that original XJ12, and that's why it is still here. It's pretty, the chrome's not very good, it's all pickled, it's not in great condition at all, and logic says just lob it into the metal recycling bin at the local tip, but no, this has got a bit of a story, and I'm sure I'm not alone in keeping junk way beyond the usual life that they'd expect to still be around, simply because you've got a bit of nostalgia and there's a bit of a backstory to it. And I'm a bit of a sentimentalist at heart, and if there's a backstory to something, I'm very, very loath to get rid of it, and that's why this XJ hubcap is still here. So this is one of the originals fitted to that XJ12L that I replaced with an immaculate hubcap that I picked up off the floor one day and had in my collection already. So that and the XJ6 grille just over the back there are my two links back to the first V12 Jaguar that I ever owned. And there is actually an XJ12 Series 1 grille back there as well, because in later years I bought a Series 1 XJ6 and I thought a V12 grille would look really, really good on that because they look so much nicer. I never actually got around to fitting it. The XJ6 went many, many years ago, about 2000-ish, 2001, but the V12 grille that I bought thinking I'd fit it to it, well, that is still here, and you never know. Maybe one day I'll buy the correct car to put the grille on, who knows. But at 10 to the gallon, it might not be straight away. Anyway, let's move along and have a look at something else here at OCC HQ that has no value whatsoever, but does have a little bit of a backstory to it. Well, okay folks, I'm going to sit down for this one. This is a door from a Bedford PC coupe utility of the early 1950s. Now, the Bedford PC, that was a panel van that was offered by Bedford, Vauxhall Bedford, in the late 1940s and early 1950s. It was an evolution of the JC van and indeed the HC van that came along before, which I think actually dates to the late 1930s. But this was off a PC of about 1950, plus or minus a couple of years, but not a panel van. This was off an Australian bodied ute, one of the special bodied pickups that were actually bodied over in Australia by a coach builder over there. The vehicles would have been shipped over as the chassis, the running gear and the front end panel work, and then the main cab and the rear body was built locally by a company over in Australia. It was like an import duty thing to get around punitive taxes on fully imported vehicles. And many, many years ago, in about 2005, 2006, I just happened to be browsing eBay in Australia, as you do one evening, and I happened to spot a fantastic looking Bedford PC ute, lovely in cream, and it looked to be in really quite nice restored-ish condition. But it just looked really, really cool. And I've always been a fan of old vans, old pickup trucks and such like. At the time, I probably had one or two E83W pickups dotted around here. And I thought, these look so cool, these old utes, the Australian bodied utes, they just look fantastic. And I thought, I wonder if that's a viable thing to actually buy. So I sent the link to someone I knew who lived in New South Wales in Australia. Just out of interest really, just to say, oh, look at this is really cool. And he said, well, if you want to buy it, I'll pick it up from, because he knew where the vendor was, he says, I'll pick it up, bring it back down, I'll take it to the docks, I think it was at Sydney possibly, and I'll sort out the shipping and send it over for you, and you just settle it with me as and when I get the final bill. And I thought, that sounds like a good idea. So the wheels started to turn, plans were put into motion, and he arranged and actually went to go and pick it up for me. So that was Ian, so big thanks to Ian if you're watching this. He brought the ute and quite a lot of spare parts back down to a friend of his yard, and he actually stored it there until such time as it could be then taken to the docks and shipped over here to the UK. And while I was just perusing eBay Australia again, once we'd started this process, I spotted a Bedford JC ute in many, many pieces. It looked in good condition, but just fully dismantled. And I thought, I guess if you're shipping one vehicle over, maybe it won't be too much of a big issue to bring another one back. Again, I sent it to my Oppo in New South Wales, and he said, yeah, sure, no worries, I'll go and fetch it. It wasn't far, I don't think it was far from where he lived. And he'd bring that one back to his friend's yard, store the two of them together, and the two of them would fit in a sort of medium-sized container and could be shipped over here. So you're still paying the one lot of shipping, but you're actually getting two vehicles in. And I thought, well, maybe the dismantled ute will provide parts to keep the other one on the road for negligible extra cost. We're not talking a huge amount of money here to buy the dismantled JC ute. So it all kind of seemed very, very sensible. And that plan again was put into action, and the two utes were stored for a little while on this friend of a friend's yard somewhere just outside of Sydney, I think it was. The tractor is getting very, very close now. Will it turn round? It's getting closer and closer, it's working its way across the field, so it's going to get noisier and noisier, which is a bit of a shame. Maybe I'll just pause for a moment and wait until it turns round. I can actually see it now. It's doing a 3-point turn. quite enjoy doing these videos. If you'd like me to do a few more of these, just sort of general talking in the garage type videos, please let me know, because literally I just thought I'm going to go outside, it's a nice day, and just do a bit of a talking to the camera type video. So if you want me to do more of these, just please pop a note into the comments. Right, I think he's going now. So anyway, we got to the point where there was one good PC ute sat in this yard ready for shipping, and a dismantled JC ute alongside it ready for shipping. And then my contact got in touch again, and he said, I was just having a flick through a local paper, and there was a little 2-line advert that said Bedford PC ute, original, phone, blah 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 blah. He said, do you want me to go and find out about that? So I said, well, why not? And it turns out that this was actually the most original of all the 3 utes that I ended up buying. It was in grey. It had been repainted at some point in time, but it was dead original. You could still see the original taxation stickers in the windscreen. It was a really good thing, to be honest. So we had a bit of a conversation, and it turns out that it would actually, all 3, with a bit of sort of clever parking, would actually fit in a large container and could be shipped over together. So that's what ended up happening, and all 3 came over. 3 of us went down there with different trailers and van and stuff like that, and we dragged back these 3 utes that had come all the way from Australia. We dragged them back from Chatham Docks back up north to hit up here, and that was how they ended up in this country. I actually sold, because the 3rd ute, that was the most original, and that's the one actually was my favourite of all. So I sold the cream one. I sold the dismantled JC ute, the second one that I bought. That ended up going, I think, to Malta. So I'd love to know where that is now. I'm sure it's still there somewhere. Hopefully someone actually did restore it. And I kept the grey ute for quite a long time afterwards. It was just stored in the back of the garage here, and a friend of mine was sort of really keen on it. And during one of those weak moments where I was deciding to sort of maybe get rid of a few projects, I decided to sell it. So I sold it to him, and he ended up selling it to someone else, and I don't know where it is now. But if you know where that the grey PC ute is now, please let me know. So this is just a reminder of quite an exciting adventure to buy 3 old Bedford utes from Australia, and this was a spare door that came with a whole mountain of spare parts which went with the utes when I decided to part with them. But yeah, I'd certainly like the grey one back if that one's still around somewhere. If it's still nice and original, I could be very tempted with that one again. But in the meantime, I'm making do with keeping this old door just as a reminder of what was quite an exciting adventure actually, to buy 3 utes from the other side of the world. Okay folks, well the tractor ploughing is getting very close indeed. In fact, I can just see it going away off down the field, so I'm going to have to hurry this one up and start drawing the video to a close. But one more item I wanted to feature before I wrap up for this particular video. Like I say, back to classic number plate CJP, what is it? CJP 395. Now we wind the clock back to the mid-1990s with this one, and just to give you a bit of background, at the time Mrs. OCC, as I've probably mentioned before, she actually ran for a little while an Austin A30 as her daily car, which was quite an interesting exercise. It had been restored, and it was in pretty good condition, to be honest, and that car was last seen heading over the Atlantic to a new life in America when we sold it, but for a long time it stayed with us, and she ran it, like I say, day in day out. We had a few little issues here and there with reliability, especially on wet days, because the fan used to suck in the water, the spray from cars in front, and it used to blow the water over the distributor and all the ignition components, and it used to regularly conk out when it was raining, which was less than good. But anyway, back to CJP 395. This is a number plate from an Austin A35. Now, I can't remember how I got in touch with this particular person, but somehow I ended up in conversation with someone, and they had an A35 on their driveway gathering dust and rust and cobwebs and many spiders. It hadn't been in use for many years, and they said, if you want it, just come and take it away. I think they just wanted to see it gone off their drive, and when I actually saw it, I could well understand why. It was a complete car, but it wasn't in good condition at all. And the icing on the cake, really, as well as it being in pretty ropey condition, was it had been painted, hand painted, brush painted in bathroom pink, one of those colours that was so popular in the 1970s, and yeah, as a result it wasn't great. And in fact, just looking at the back of the number plate, I'm reminded of that particular colour. I'm not sure if the camera will pick that up, but yeah, there you go. There are the remnants of the colour that this particular car was. CJP was not looking great, I have to say, but it was free, so I wasn't going to turn that away. And a friend of mine rather foolishly offered to let me use his driveway, because at the time I was still living with my folks and he lived around the corner. He was a car guy, and he said, put it on my drive and you can strip it there. So I actually dismantled it there, and we got many useful parts of it, and a few bits and pieces, switchgear and bits like that, are still around, dotted around the garage here. But this is one of the very few remaining items of that Austin A35. It wasn't in great condition, but the other reason I wanted it, of course, as well as indoors having the Austin A30, I had the Austin A40, the Farina Mark 1 here, and of course, as you'll know, the running gear for the A35 was very similar to the early A40s. So that is why I have this number plate for CJP 395 here hanging up in the garage. I can hear the tractor coming, so I'm going to wrap up this particular video. If you'd like me to do any more of these, just simple little chatting videos, please let me know in the comments, and I'll be back very soon with many more classic car videos. So thanks so much for watching. Bye for now. I certainly picked the right day to do this, didn't I? Wait for the tractor to go. Busy farmers. I think it's just heading away now, so that's good news. Right. Maybe we'll just adjust that a fraction as well.